So Kanya, let me know when you want to open it up, huh? When you want to start.
Okay, then we can start.
Can start? Okay. Okay. Welcome everybody. Very happy that you could join us. The world is preparing, as you know, to meet at the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh to discuss climate change. It's a tough time in the world. There are two different, it is very clear that this is a time when on one hand we are seeing huge interest in energy from the rich countries who are going back to using fossil fuel on one hand. On the other hand, we are seeing the revenge of nature. We are seeing huge extreme weather events hitting every part of the world. So today, what we are presenting to you is something that we have been working on, and something that we have been extremely worried about, because we know that these extreme weather events are increasing in terms of frequency and intensity. But it is very difficult for us to understand just the scale and the magnitude of what is happening. Because, you know, when you see a flood that happens in Bengaluru, you know it's happened. And then you read about a cyclone that is happening somewhere else, and then you read about something else that is happening. But the fact that what is happening in our world, what is the scale of the change? And what does it do in terms of the losses and the damages that it is causing to people and to the economy? This has really been something that we have been trying to understand. And for that, I would like to present my two colleagues, Rajat Sengupta and Kiran Pandey, who have really worked very hard under Richard Mahapatra, who all of you know is the managing editor of Down to Earth, to go deep into the data. And we wanted to understand what is it that we can understand, what we can see from data. And these two data that we will be presenting to you, the sources of data are government, primarily from the Indian Meteorological Department, which tells us what is the extreme weather events, and the Disaster Management Department of the Home Ministry, which has some computation on the losses and damages. But as we present to you, and the effort that my colleagues have made to go day by day into the data from the website, download it, put it into an Excel sheet, understand the range as it is emerging. We want you to please see this and see both what we can show you and what we can't show you. And therefore the gaps that exist, they also need to be addressed, because as the world moves towards a new abnormal, we are clearly understanding that it is time we just moved beyond counting the disasters to counting the losses and damages. We are able to put a human face on the impacts of climate change. We are able to then go and demand reparations from the developed world for the losses and damages that countries like India are seeing today. So I think this is really our effort today, is to understand the scale, the magnitude, and then of course, try and understand what more do we need to do to be able to count more accurately, not just the disaster, but the loss and damage and the impact on people. So I will straight away ask my colleague, Rajat Sengupta, to present to you the key findings of our report and to explain what have we done. Rajat.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you everyone for joining us on a weekday. So we're excited to release this book or the report where we have tried to collate all the extreme weather events that have happened in the first 9 months of this year. So what we have done is we have gone through each and every day and we have looked at all the government sources, the two government sources that ma'am talked about. We have looked at IMD press releases We've also looked at the disaster management divisions, which is a division within the Ministry of Home Affairs. So we have looked at their data sets as well, their reports that they've come up with on regular basis. And at the end of it, we have also looked at media reports to look at the gaps that exist therein. And we looked at two things. First, what we have looked at is we have looked at the number of days when extreme weather events happened in the first 9 months of this year. That is roughly 273 days. So that is 273 days in the first 9 months. So what we found was that out of those 273 days, India experienced extreme weather events in some part of the country on 241 days. So the first is that how many days there have been extreme weather event in the country. And the second is, which is slightly more difficult, we have tried to also assess the loss and damage because of these extreme weather events. So I'll just quickly take you through what we have done in terms of the methodology that we've adopted, and also the broad ideas or the broad findings that we've come across. So first of all, extreme weather event. So India does not have an official definition of extreme weather events, but UN IPCC defines it as a rare event that is rare at a particular place and time of year. So what we found was that these are events that are rare in terms of either the time when it has happened or in terms of where it has happened, and also in India context, it is also the intensity at which it has happened. So IMD in India, Indian Meteorological Department, it has defined the broad extreme weather event types that exist in India. So we have sourced it from there. So if you look at it, so we have sourced our information from IMD. So over there, we've looked at the daily press releases that the agency comes out with, along with their all India weather summary bulletins. From this, we've been able to identify the number of days when we've had different kinds of extreme weather events, like how many days we had lightning and storms, how many days we had heavy rainfalls that led to floods and landslides, how many days we had cold wave and cold days, how many days we had heat waves. So we have been able to collate that from the IMD data. Along with that, IMD comes up with a monthly analysis of its extreme weather events. So it is referred to as the climate summary. In that, it gives a small estimate of the loss and damage, and it sources that piece of information from different media sources. So we have also looked at that for the loss and damage part of it. Along with that, what we've looked at is the Disaster Management Division's situation report. So this report of floods and heavy rainfall, this is released every time there is a flood and heavy rainfall. So basically what we found was during the monsoon period, that is starting from June till September, it was coming out regularly. And prior to that, it was coming out whenever they felt the need for it. So it was not regular beyond that. And it also focuses predominantly on flood, heavy rainfall, and the allied problems in terms of landslides and some drowning. So that is basically what it looks at. And from this report, we've been able to find the loss and damage. So along with that, we looked at the media reports. So this is the basic methodology that we followed. After that, what we have also looked at is I'll just run through the different disaster types. So I'll just help you understand what we've done in these slides. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, your screen, you're not showing the full screen.
I'm not showing the full screen, ma'am.
No. So you need to move it to full screen. It would be better if you can.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's bottom. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. So if you look at it over here, what I've done in these slides is on the left-hand side. So the report, these are pages straight out from the report. So on the left-hand side, we've got each and every extreme weather event types that we've looked at. On the right-hand side, for our convenience and understanding, I've looked at the IMD definition. So while India does not have a definition of extreme weather events per se, it has defined different extreme weather events and the types that exist within it, and the highlights of what we found. So in the report, if you look at it, each of the extreme weather events, there is an India map where we look at each of the individual states and union territories and how many days they experience this particular extreme weather event, lightning and storms over here. And along with that, how many deaths happen. And if you look at the panel right at the bottom, over there, we have given the month-wise breakup of how many days within each of these months extreme weather events were recorded. So what we found in terms of lightning and storms is that we found we had out of the 273 days, 159 days India experienced lightning and storms. Some part of India experienced lightning and storms. I'll just qualify over here. What we have assumed is lightning and storms includes all kinds of, besides the layman understanding of lightning and storms, which is thunderstorms and lightning. We have also included hailstorms, We've included different kinds of dust storms. So any other, all the other storm systems that exist, we have also included that. And what they collectively did was they claimed 954 lives in India in the first 9 months so far. A state-wise analysis suggests that Madhya Pradesh was the worst hit by this kind of extreme weather event. And Madhya Pradesh saw extreme lightning storms on 46 days out of the first 9 months, and they caused 164 deaths. Second is Maharashtra. Over there, 42 days it recorded extreme lightning storms, and 94 deaths happened because of it. Then lightning and storms was also seen, if you look at the month-wise analysis, on in July, all the 31 days had lightning and storms in some part of the country or the other. Similarly, a very high number of lightning and storms also happened in September. So from there on, the next extreme weather event type that we've looked at is heavy rains, floods, and landslide. I'll just qualify right at the beginning what we mean by it. So according to IMD, there are 3 classifications of heavy rain. So there is heavy rains, which is basically 64.5 to 115.5 millimeter rainfall in 24 hours in a place. So 64.5 to 115 millimeter of rainfall in 24 hours in a place. If a place receives that much amount of rainfall, it is a heavy rainfall. We have considered heavy rainfall only and only when we have considered heavy rainfall only and only when there is a disaster or there has been some kind of damage that has been associated with it. Except for the heavy rainfall, we have looked at very heavy rainfall, which is 115 to 204.4 millimeter, and we have looked at extremely heavy rainfall events as well. So what we found over there was that India experienced heavy rainfall, floods, and landslides on 157 days in this 9 months. And they collectively claimed 1,214 lives. Assam was the worst hit. It saw heavy rainfalls on 113 days, and that resulted in 221 deaths. Madhya Pradesh had 72 days of heavy rains and floods and landslides, and that led to 112 deaths. What we also found was that June, July, August, September, on all of these 4 months, we had heavy rains, floods, and landslides in some part of the country or the other. Next, we looked at heat waves. As we all know, this March was the hottest March India has ever experienced since 1901. That's like 121 years. We have reached that record. So what happened because of that is that we started experiencing heat waves early this year. So March, towards the end of March, or rather in April, heat waves normally come to India. But this year, starting from March, we had heat waves. So what we found over there is that 66 of the 9 months, 66 days out of the 9 months, we experienced heat waves, and they were spread across 20 states and union territories, and they collectively claimed 45 lives. Rajasthan was the first hit with 42 days of heat waves, but surprisingly, Rajasthan did not record any deaths. In contrast, Maharashtra, which had heat wave events on 24 days, had 34 deaths. Similarly, you can look at the month-wise analysis is basically March had 17 days, April had 23 days, which is usually the heat wave period. May had 11 days, June had 14 days, and July had 1 day of heat wave in India. The next weather event that we looked at was cold waves and cold days. I'll just clarify what these 2 things are. So cold waves is basically when the night temperature or the minimum temperature of a place drops beyond the threshold. So if the minimum temperature of a place drops beyond below 4.5 to 6.4 degrees. So basically, if it is 0 degrees is normally happens normally over there. So it's minus 4.5 to minus 6.4 degrees Celsius. And cold days is calculated on the maximum temperature, which is usually the daytime temperature. So we've looked at both cold days, and extreme cold days and cold waves, which is the thresholds are higher. If you look at the definition, it is written over there. So what we found over there as well is that on 30 days, India experienced cold wave and cold days, even though no deaths had happened, but we know it leads to a lot of other problems. And they were quite widespread. So 14 states and UTs experienced cold waves and cold days. Finally, we found that Madhya Pradesh was the worst hit with 21 days of cold waves and cold days. Uttar Pradesh had it in 20 days. And cold waves is continued from January and it ended in February. So in January, 22 days had cold waves and cold days in India, followed by February when 8 days reported cold waves and cold days. Finally, we had snowfall, and this was a very tricky one because so the problem with snowfall normally happens across the country. So what we did was we realized that snowfall is IMD classifies it as a hydrological hazard, which causes a lot of traffic snarls, damages to crops, and to the lives and livelihoods of people. So what we have done is we have only considered those snowfall events in which there have been human deaths. So we found there have been two such events this year. One was in Jammu and Kashmir, in which one death was reported. That happened in January this year. And the second happened in Arunachal Pradesh in Feb, in which 7 deaths were reported. Then we also looked at cloudbursts. So cloudburst is nothing but a very heavy rainfall in a localized area. So it is 100 mm per hour threshold of rainfall, and it is usually accompanied with strong winds and lightning. So we found cloudbursts have happened on 11 days in this entire period, and they claimed 33 lives across the country. The worst hit areas were Himachal Pradesh, where 7 days of cloudbursts took place and it led to 12 deaths. And Jammu and Kashmir, where only 2 days of cloudbursts happened, 2 events happened effectively, and they claimed 20 deaths in total. Finally, we also looked at cyclone. So in cyclone, so what we found was in cyclone, there were only this year only Andhra Pradesh was the only place which had cyclone event, and in that it led to 3 deaths. So moving on from the different kinds of extreme weather disasters that we looked at, if you look at the regional analysis, so when we are basically piecing all of these individual extreme weather events together and we're looking at it combined, we found that India experienced an extreme weather event on 241 days out of the 273. So individually they might look very small, but effectively that is around 90%, so 88, a little more than 88% of the days between January 1st and September 30th. India, some part of the country experienced an extreme weather event. What happened because of that is, according to government data, this is broadly government data and a little bit of media numbers are also included for the pre-monsoon period. 2,755 people died because of this. It also affected 1.8 million hectares of crop area, destroyed 4,16,000 houses, and it killed around 69,000 animals. If you look at it region-wise, it becomes interesting. So if you look at region-wise, central region saw the maximum amount of extreme weather event days. So it happened on 198 days, and they cumulatively led to 887 deaths. Southern Peninsula was the least affected. It had extreme weather events on 125 days. And despite being least affected, it had 350 lives lost, along with a lot of crop damage. If you look at it, 1.06 million hectares of crop damage has happened. Our understanding is the reason why there is a Southern Peninsula has a very high crop damage area in the government records. So for the crop area, we've only looked at government records is because state governments have to report it. So they have done a better job than the rest of the country. But still, there were 350 lives that were lost in Southern Peninsula, and close to 1 million, a little more than 1 million hectare of crop area was affected. Then Northwest region had the second highest at 195, which is marginally lower than Central region. 195 days they experienced extreme weather events, and it claimed 735 lives. Finally, East and Northeast region, which also is the region which recorded a lot of record-breaking temperature and rainfall month-wise. So over there, 171 days of extreme weather events were reported, which claimed 783 lives in total. So this is basically the analysis of the extreme weather events by the disaster type, and also by the way we have looked at the different region-wise. Thank you, ma'am. You can take it over.
Thank you, Rajat. And yes, Kiran, can you now take over and explain to us what we found in terms of seasons and how the seasons were impacted? Kiran, we can't hear you. Kiran, we can't hear you.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible now.
Okay, thank you. Is my screen visible?
Please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so as Rajat informed you that the report has got detailed sections, and I would be covering the section on the weather events to the seasons. Now, if you go across the report, we have categorized this report under, by seasons as well, and the seasons have been categorized as per the IMD categorization. So we have taken the seasons for the month of January to Feb, that is the winter season. The report talks about the month from March to May, that is the pre-monsoon season as per the IMD, and we have the monsoon season, which is from June to September. So now when we assess the numbers for the month of January to February, which is usually a colder month, it is known for the cold weather. So one would assume that, well, if it's cold, it's not unusual. But then when we dig through the numbers, what we found was, and it was also a perception that people had in the weather this time, in the month of January, Feb, that yes, it was much colder this time. And the numbers do show that. For example, we found that in January, the days were much cooler than the normal temperatures, which means that if the days are cooler, it is, so we refer to as, it is known as cold days. And if there are cold days, which means you will feel more chiller during the month of January, which was the scenario this season. Similarly, February also was colder than the normal as per the numbers that we have found from IMD and the data that we found through IMD. In terms of the cumulative number that we came across, there were 30 cold wave or cold days during this period. Okay. And this also included the hailstorm days. So what does this indicate? So while the country did see the cold wave and cold days, and they were extremes, but we also had hailstorm days. And if you dig across the numbers in the report, you'll find that the hailstorm days where actually Madhya Pradesh was top in this context. And Madhya Pradesh suffered a lot due to hailstorms. And what does this mean for the common man? If we also saw the news reports, and we realized that, so if you correlate the events with the scene on the ground, you will see that if there's more cold and there are more hailstorm days, your agriculture is affected. And that actually happened in Madhya Pradesh. The farmers there suffered due to extreme hail days during this period. And if you further go backwards, because we also track the historical trend record as IMD has presented. In fact, IMD comes with a monthly bulletin report, and we tracked that report, and we realized that the month of January was unusually wet. It was, in fact, it was wettest since 1901. So what does this mean? That means in 121 years, this month in January was a cold, was the wettest because we had a lot of rainfall in this month. It was extreme rainfall. Now, on the other hand side, February was definitely colder than the normal, but it was also unusual in another context as well. It was drier than the normal. Again, if you see what does this mean for agriculture, this means, yes, your agriculture also will be affected by to this. Again, if you refer to media reports that we did to see this, to come up with this book, we realized that, yes, agriculture was definitely affected in the month of February because of these extreme events. So it is not just extreme events, but this translates into a larger crisis for the country. Now, in terms of geography, so which was the most hit state in these 2 months? We found that Uttar Pradesh, the northern state, was the worst hit during these months. In fact, 25 days during this period, the state had experienced extreme weather events. And then the Madhya Pradesh. Again, these two are the largest states. That means if they are suffering from these events, it will impact the economy. And again, agriculture is critical for the economy in these states. So this also means that somewhere down the line, agriculture is getting affected, and the reports have clearly shown that. there's just a screenshot of this in the book. But this clearly indicates on the right-hand side, you will see that the number of days when the country experienced the diversity of events, the right-hand side. Okay? And this map clearly shows that the states of Madhya Pradesh and UP were affected the most due to these events. I would urge you to see this report for more details of this fact sheet. And this also informs you that how January was the wettest this year, since the records kept by the IMD. Now, let's talk about the pre-monsoon season, that is months from March to May. This is not hidden from all of us. In fact, this year, March definitely made a lot of news. And it was because the country had witnessed early arrival of heat waves this year. Well, heat waves in the month of April is definitely a normal phenomenon. But if it arrives earlier, there was this is a crisis for the country. It was a crisis. So it was the March was unusually hot this year. Again, if you see the historical trend, interestingly, March was the warmest this year since the records are kept. So if you translate these figures for the first 3 months of the year, you will realize that every month the country had broken the record for 121 years. And if you go to the month of April, again, the third warmest April. Undoubtedly, this year had definitely made a landmark in terms of weather events. Well, these events are not defined till now by IMD, but this evidence that we have, the book presents clearly shows that yes, 2022 is a landmark year in terms of weather events. May the temperature was normal, but again, May was different. Why? Because the state of Assam, which is known for floods, saw floods when they arrived a bit earlier in the month of Assam, and that led to serious crisis. And if you see this book, you will realize what we're talking about. Okay, the state of Assam had one of the worst floods this year, and Downward has reported about this in its cover stories during the monsoon season of this year. Now, let me talk about the overall picture for this season. India had around 81 out of 92 days, which are extreme events days, and the geography was across the country. 31 states or UTs were affected by these events. So this is a pan-India phenomena, and the crisis is for the entire country, and we have to recognize that crisis. Amongst these events, well, heat waves were reported on 51 days, followed by lightning and storms, and the heavy rains on 29 days. But which state was the most affected? Again, Rajasthan is on the top, which is the worst hit state. But why? It is due to heat waves. Now let me clarify. Rajasthan is known for the heat waves. It is not a surprise. But the extremity of the heat wave was much more this time. Even to the geography, it was widespread in the state of Rajasthan this time. Similarly, Assam had floods this year, but the scale of floods that the state witnessed was devastating, and historically as well. Madhya Pradesh was again, it again figures in this season as well. And what we also realized that, when we were seeing the season-wise analysis, that Madhya Pradesh stands out across all the seasons. This state has witnessed a diversity of crisis almost every season. Now, the monsoon season. As for IMD, June, September falls under this season. Well, the data shows that the year had normal monsoon this year, but it is not a good news. It seems to be good on the face of it, But when you deep dive into the numbers, you realize that it is not as it seems to be. Some parts were definitely better, but some parts were also drier. Okay, so it is not uniformly spread. Again, if you see the historical data over here, you realize that what we're talking about. In this season, the country had its warmest August, 11th warmest August, again in 121 years. September was again 8th warmest since 121 years. So just because let's see that the history has changed this year. Every month, every season was a record-breaking season for the country. So the season began with floods in Assam and Meghalaya, and then we had experienced dry August. But in this month, it was the month was dry. But states like Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Maharashtra were drowning under floods. In the southern part of the country, in the month of August, Kerala, Karnataka had flood-like conditions. Now, to sum it all, in this monsoon season, the weather events were reported on 122 days during the season, and this was the worst season in terms of human lives. 2,400 lives were lost due to these extreme weather events, and in terms of crop area lost, the agricultural damage that the country had suffered. It was around 1.8 million hectares of crop area, and this is when we have still not estimated the crop area which has been damaged due to floods or due to extreme events in the country. For example, Madhya Pradesh was undoubtedly drowning under floods, and it had the crops were lost in the state. Similarly, in the state of Haryana also lost its crops due to floods this season. But if you see the reports that are there in the central government, in the public domain, let me clarify. Data in the public domain that is there with the IMD and the Disaster Management Division of the Ministry of Urban Affairs, Ministry of Home Affairs. In their reports, these states like Madhya Pradesh, Haryana, as per their reports, these states have not had any loss in terms of crop area. Okay? But the reality is these states had suffered a lot in terms of their agriculture. The farmers were victims of these crises, and it's time that the crisis and the data that explains this crisis is documented regularly. Because what we are assuming that the states may be documenting at their own end, but the country gets larger picture through the cumulative reports that have been put out by the government to these reports. And it's important that the larger picture is presented to us through the data in the public domain that is as of now available with the Disaster Management Division of the Ministry of Home Affairs. And there's one other message that comes up very clearly with this is that now, interestingly, when we see the data across the season and for the loss and damage that this season had for the country, we realize that most of the report data on the loss and damage we got from the Disaster Management Division, but we also saw the IMD reports. But what was surprising was that IMD refers to media reports for data on loss and damage. This is when the country has a division that is supposed to track these figures regularly. That means it is time now that we recognize the crisis and put up a system to document numbers on crisis regularly in the public domain. Because again, we are assuming that states may be seeing the data at their own end, but the time has come that the country is made aware of this the crisis through the numbers, because we need evidence to show that there's a crisis. And it is important because now the country is also reporting on global front on these damages. If we have a certain database where the damage is being reported, it will undoubtedly help the country to present the larger picture of the loss and damage at global front as well, and make claims for the damages done due to their deeds for the country. I think I'll just sum up and that's thank you.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you. So can you close this? I'm going to ask our Akshat now. Akshat, the big issue really is also, if you can very briefly explain the links with climate change, because it's very clear from what Rajat and Kiran have shown us that there is a change in terms of intensity, frequency, number. I mean, essentially what they're showing you is one disaster a day in these 9-month periods that we have analyzed. But is there a link with climate change? How would you establish it? So very quickly, if you could explain that.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very much. Basically, I don't have a presentation. I'll just be speaking. And extreme weather events are not happening right now. They have been happening all throughout Earth's history. And what is happening right now is we are changing the character of these extreme weather events. As Kiran ma'am and Rajat have both explained that the intensity and the frequency of these events is increasing over India. So what has happened is in the last 100 years, India has warmed by around 0.7 degrees Celsius. This was from a report prepared by the MOFCC last year. And so because of this warming and global warming in general, there is a change in character of these extreme weather events. For instance, just if you look at heavy rainfall events, that have increased, that we have seen through the data that they have increased enormously throughout the first 9 months of this year. In general, for every 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature, the atmospheric humidity or moisture increases by 7%. So once this moisture increases, the probability of these extreme rainfall events, heavy rainfall events, increases drastically. And that is what is happening right now over India. For instance, during the monsoon months, there are days when there are extreme weather events, extreme rainfall events that are happening, and then floods happen after that, and then there are extended periods of dry weather. For instance, just in the case of Assam and Meghalaya, which suffered from extensive floods early this season, early in the monsoon season in June. Devastating floods all through Assam, Meghalaya, many other northeastern states. And immediately after that, in July and August, that entire region went through a very dry period. And there was no rainfall at all in that region. So that is the change in character that basically global warming is bringing about. And also it is basically making the monsoon season a flood and drought cycle. There are floods, and then there are a lot of rainfall coming in very short bursts of time, and that basically causes floods. And then there are extended periods of dry weather where basically droughts start happening, or drought-like conditions start happening, and it affects both of these events. Basically affect agriculture in general. The other changes that have happened are in the heat waves. For instance, just this year, heat waves started very early, as we have seen in March, which is very abnormal, because there was practically no spring season for India and Pakistan. Both India and Pakistan were suffering from extensive heat waves, and there was practically no spring season. Many of the states that have suffered from heat waves this year, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, are the top two. They are usually prone to heat waves. But there are other states like Himachal Pradesh, Jammu Kashmir, Uttarakhand, which are not prone to heat waves at all, but they suffered from heat waves this year, and very early heat waves. In fact, Himachal Pradesh suffered from heat waves for the first time in March, April, and May since 1970, at least since the records began. So these are the changes that basically climate change and global warming is bringing about. Then there is the effect on cyclones. Cyclones are carrying much more rainfall. They are rapidly intensifying, which means that over warm waters, they become much more intense, much more quickly. For instance, this had happened in the case of Cyclone Amphan, which had hit West Bengal in May 2020. And other than that, the wind speeds of these cyclones are also increasing. Then there is a definite increase in the intensity, the wind speed intensity of these cyclones. For instance, Amphan was one of the strongest cyclones ever recorded in the Bay of Bengal. So these are the changes in the characters that are happening. And now climate scientists, IPCC scientists, weather attribution scientists have started basically seeing that all the human emissions, human greenhouse gas emissions that are already there in the atmosphere, they have started affecting extreme weather events. There is a group of scientists. There is a class of scientists known as the who conduct weather attribution science, which is a very emerging science, which basically puts numbers to the role of climate change in these events. And for instance, particularly in the case of heat waves this year, they have put a number of 30 times. Basically climate change made those heat waves 30 times more likely. So if there was, in the case that there was no greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere, these events would not have happened. Would not have happened. So they put these numbers to the role of played by climate change in the occurrence of these events, and also the intensity, increasing the intensity and the frequency of these events.
Good. Thank you, Akshit. Before I move on, and I want to give an overview of what is happening, Rajat, can you explain, because there are a lot of questions on the database that you have. Can you explain the public database that we are also releasing today, where you will be able to show all the data that we have collated, and that each month you will be uploading and updating this database. So can you explain that?
Yes, ma'am. Along with the report that we are launching, which is basically, which will have an annual periodicity, so we are also launching a database of these disasters. So the raw data that we have collected from the different sources, the government and the media sources, and we are putting it on a dashboard on our website. So this is the website that we are launching along with this. Over here, we plan to update the raw data every month. So right now we have got data from January till September. Every month, we will be mid every month, we'll be updating the data set. So I'll just quickly take you through what the database is all about, and so that you can understand how to navigate it and what all information exists. So this is basically a screenshot of the India database. We also have similar databases for the different regions, the IMD regions that we looked at. So I'll just quickly show you the snapshot. On the left-hand side, in the gray panel, you have the headline figure of how many days have been affected and what are the areas that were affected. Over here, you have the loss and damage data. So we have looked at 4 parameters. We've looked at human deaths. We've looked at crop area affected in hectares. We've looked at houses damaged, and we have looked at animal deaths. Then this panel that you see, this long bar that you see over here, this shows you what kind of extreme weather events have happened during this entire period. In this case, you can look at 159 days of lightning and storms happened in India. Similarly, 157 days of heavy rains and floods happened. And the panel at the bottom, this is basically the individual day information that we had. And all the individual information in terms of the bars that you see, you can see multiple colors. All of these colors signify the kind of extreme weather event that happened on these individual days. So if you look right in the middle, you see a lot of red. If you see right in the beginning, you see a lot of light blue, that's cold wave and cold days. And then the gray over here is heavy rainfall and floods and landslides. So this is basically a screenshot of that. So this is the home page that we have. So we have this followed by the region-wise snapshot in terms of the loss and damage parameters and the number of days these were extreme weather events have been recorded in these regions. And the state-wise information is also there in this. And once you click on any of these, this will take you to the database. I'll just jump onto one of the databases right now. So once you click on this, it takes you to the database. So we are going to the India one right now just to show you what all can be done over here. One second. I think there is some problem with, 1 second. I'll just share my screen once more. I'll just jump back to this. Yeah. So if you go to the India page, so this is the interactive database. So it takes a little while to load.
Rajat, can't see much. It's a blank screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Loading?
Yes, ma'am. It is loading right now.
Okay.
So we jump to the northwest region right now, just to get another feel of the same thing. So this one is the interactive database. So what we saw on the homepage were static images of the same information. So if you look at it, what you as an individual user can do is right on top of the there's a panel, the state-wise panel, there's a month-wise panel over here. So so we are looking at the Northwest region. So it had 195 days of extreme weather events. So if I were to see what happened in January, if I click on January and I wait a little bit, so the data updates itself and it gives me the information. So in the Northwest region of India, there were 14 deaths in January. And similar information, so deaths happened in Himachal Pradesh, 13 of them happened in Himachal Pradesh, 1 happened in Jammu and Kashmir. And just for the month of January, the individual days and the extreme weather events that happened along with it. So if you look at it, so the tallest bar over here is this. So on 14th of January, 6 states and union territories in India experienced cold waves and cold days. Chandigarh, Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. Similarly, if you jump to 23rd of January, sorry. So you look at 4 states and union territories had cold waves, and 1 had heavy rainfall, floods, and landslides. Similarly, you can combine the different months, or you can click on select all, and then it jumps back to the period, the entire data period from Jan to September. And what you can also do simultaneously is, if you hover on top of any of these individual states, it will give you the snapshot for that state in that for that period. So if you look at Rajasthan, Rajasthan had 99 days of extreme weather events in this entire period of 9 months, out of which heat waves were on 42 days. 33 days had heavy rains and floods, lightning and storms on 20 days, and cold wave and cold days on the remaining days. So this is basically what we've been able to do, and you can see this for India as a whole. You can see this for Central region, Northwest region, South Peninsula region, and Eastern Northeast region. And you can take your own time and you can look at the raw data and you can analyze it in your own way, and you can come up with your own insights as well. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Rajat. And one of the questions we have, just to explain to everybody, we have given in the raw data the sources of data as well. So the effort is to try and make it open, public, and then you can use it as you want. The data sources are government sources, IMD and Disaster Management Department of the Ministry of Home Affairs. And only when we have not found the data from either one of the sources, we have corroborated it using media sources. Now, media sources are also used by IMD to put out the data on loss and damage, which also tells us how much we need to improve our systems of data collection and data management. Now, before I close, I want to be able to explain a little bit of the big messages that we have found as we have done this presentation. So, is my screen visible?
Not yet, ma'am. Not yet.
Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So very quickly, I want to just reiterate what Rajat and Kiran and Akshit have said. The fact is, we know that this was going to happen. If you look at the IPCC report, it says very clearly that the climate change impacts are devastating. It says that half the world's population is highly vulnerable, that the poor are worst hit, they are the victims, and that all this will lead to displacement, people being forced out of their villages, homes, because of repeated extreme and variable events. Now, the reason we put this report together is, as I explained at the beginning, this is not a report. Many of you have asked, what are the solutions? We know the solutions. We can find out more solutions. But this report is primarily to help us to get a full picture of the extreme weather events. It is
can you put it on full screen?
Sorry?
Can you put it on full screen?
I can, yeah, good question. Just a minute. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sukanya. So we need to get a full picture of extreme weather events. We need to count more than the disasters. We need to count loss and damages. Now, many of you in the chat have asked, do you have data down to the level of villages, people, who is affected? You will not believe the effort we've had to make to get you even this picture from the 2 databases. The IMD puts out a daily press release or a summary of events that have happened in the last 24 hours and that are forecast to happen for the next 24 hours. My colleagues Rajit and Kiran have downloaded every day's bulletin to put this full report together. And that only tells us the event as it is happening. When you look at loss and damages, the data that we have is from the Disaster Management Department of the Ministry of Home Affairs, and that only gives data for the period of the monsoons in a more detailed, cumulative manner. The data before that and the data after that, we have to depend on media sources, as does IMD. So it is very clear, as both Rajit and Kiran said, that we need to put a human face on the impacts of climate change. We need to understand the sheer magnitude of what is happening. And for this, we need to get our databases in order. And we can do when we do this, and as we do this, we must invest in risk and resilience. It is very clear that we need strategies to cope better with the extreme weather events. Now, that could be water harvesting strategies, flood mitigation strategies, changing the agricultural practices, but we have to do so given this extent of losses. But we also need this because you need to be able to demand reparations for loss and damage from countries that are responsible for emissions in the atmosphere. Now, this is why the conversation that I just had with Akshit becomes so important, because we need to make the link between this extreme weather events and the abnormality of it because of climate change. And therefore, this has to be part of the international discussion. And with all this, we need to understand that what we are seeing today is only the tip of the iceberg. The future will be much worse because the temperatures are expected now to cross 1.5 degrees centigrade. We are at 1.1 right now, and now widely accepted to reach 3 degrees centigrade. So what you're seeing today, the magnitude of what you're seeing today is just the beginning. So the new abnormal speaks of the change that is happening. The bottom line of what we are telling you is that India has seen close to a disaster every day in the 9 months of this year, from heat to cold waves, cyclones, lightning, heavy rain, floods, and landslides. It has also experienced record-breaking temperature. This in turn has had massive impacts on people, the floods, the loss of life, property, and of course, what is not ever captured in this data is because of the floods and the extreme rain that comes, we also have prolonged periods of drought because we are unable to capture the water and recharge it for the longer periods of non-rain. The other thing that Rajit and Kiran spoke about, and I think it's very important for us to make the connection is, just look at these 4 data points that we have put out. In 2022, India recorded its 7th wettest January since 1901. This March was also the warmest ever and the driest ever in 121 years. It was also the country's 3rd warmest April, 11th warmest August, 8th warmest September. East India, which is one of the worst impacted regions, and Northeast India saw its warmest and driest July in 121 years. The region also recorded its 2nd warmest August and 4th warmest September. The reason I'm repeating this is that this is what is climate change. It's not a single event, but that once in 100 years is now becoming once in 5 years, once in 4 years, once in 3, and slowly going to become once every year. This is the sheer impact that we are seeing. This is the watermark, as I call it, of climate change, because this is not about measuring a single event, but the increased frequency of the events. And worse, they're coming together. Each month is breaking a new record. And this in turn, this is the human face that we need to keep remembering. It's breaking the backs of the poorest, who are worst impacted and losing their capacities to cope with these repeated events. They're also happening together. I'm not going to repeat this, but Rajat and Kiran have already spoken about it. But all extreme disasters have happened in this period. Lightning, storms, heavy rain, extremely heavy rain, heat wave, cold wave. And remember, cold wave and frost, we may not have the loss of human life, but it is very bad for farmers. And this is not captured adequately in the data because DMD, Disaster Management Department of the Ministry of Home Affairs, collects data from states only for the monsoon period. We don't have this data. And that's where the question of solution comes in also. Farmers must have adequate systems for compensation, for insurance, for weather-related losses. Without this, we know that their livelihoods are threatened. The good news with cyclones, which Rajat talked about, and I want to reiterate it, is that we have seen more cyclones, or we have seen cyclones, but the number of people who died were few. Only 2 lives were lost, even though the area that was destroyed was close to 1 lakh hectares. And this is something that we have to recognize, that the Indian Meteorological Department's outstanding work on on cyclone forecasting, that even as cyclones are becoming more rapidified, the technical word that Akshat used, which is because of warmer oceans and the changes and differences between land and ocean mass, the nature of cyclones is changing, but yet IMD has been able to provide good data on forecasting. And also state governments have vastly improved their systems of disaster management so that they can evacuate people and they can provide them the assistance. But what we don't think about is the development dividend that gets lost with every cyclone. The roads that get destroyed, the health facilities, the schools, the water system. And each such event, a cyclone, a heat wave, a cold wave, all coming one after the other, people lose their ability to cope. And this really is where the crisis of climate change is exacerbating all the other challenges that we have. Because the flood, the drought, the cyclone are not single-day events. They cripple people, they destroy livelihoods, they take away the development dividend. And that's why we are seeing so much more migration happening. So the bottom line of what we are saying is that we need to count losses and damages, not just the number of disasters. And the reason we say this is that we know and we recognize that whatever data we are putting out is actually not accurate. It is not it is not rigorous. It is not properly collected. Because we also know that in India, there is this phrase, everybody loves a good drought. Every state government, every time there's a disaster, presents an inflated bill, an overestimate for central assistance. Now, we don't have a system, therefore, where we are doing rigorous accounting of losses and damages. And in these abnormal times, when the magnitude of the disasters has gone up so much, when we are seeing such enormous crisis, clearly this is needed. And this really then becomes also the focus for COP27, which begins next week, on the need for reparation funds for countries for these losses and damages, but also good methodologies so that we can account for these losses, put a human face on the impacts of climate change, and make sure that people get compensated. So this really is why we put this report together and what is the nature of the report that we have done. I can see a lot of good questions that are there, but as always, our effort is really, and I have tried to capture many of the questions that were raised by people in the conclusion that we have done. But essentially what we are doing here is to put together for you the data that exists in India and also to show you the enormous gaps that exist in this data. We have to improve the database. We have to improve the way we are accounting for the losses and damages. And we need to make sure that we can do this so that we can invest in the resilience, in risk abatement strategies, everything that we know that needs to be done in the name of good development and adaptation. But we also need to do this so that we can put pressure on the countries that have contributed to the emissions in the atmosphere, that this is part of the climate justice demand, that this has to be paid for. I wish we could do the same database for Africa. I wish we could do that for South Asia, but the data sources we have not been able to find, but we will, because we need to put this collective voice together of countries who are impacted by climate change and people who are impacted by climate change. So forgive me, we will not take any questions because I just have this range of questions that actually go beyond even the scope of what we are discussing today. But I hope you will find this report useful. Many of you have asked where you can get the report. The report will be downloadable on our website. Rajat, it is available. It'll be available on the Down to Earth website, which I know all of you will know of. So please download the report. Please read it. Please look at the database. Please use the database. We will keep improving it. This is the first cut that we have done, but we will keep improving it because we have to be able to provide this comprehensive picture so that we can comprehend the huge changes that are happening in our world. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you for being with us. And thank you so much for your wonderful comments. Every time I read the comments and read all of you, it really gives us the energy to keep going. So please stay with us. Please stay with us. We really need each one of you to be with us and to keep telling us that there is some benefit in the work we do. Thank you.